Here comes this man causing trouble again. I originally thought he was a tough guy, who could press bullies to the ground. But the truth is that he's so hungry, that he eats rat meat raw, drinks toilet water and rummages through trash cans. Why on earth has he fallen into such a situation? Let's take a look at this thriller starring Nicolas Cage together. Cage has worked hard in a foreign land for many years. But he meets with a midlife crisis and family breakdown. Therefore, he decides to take his son back to his hometown in Australia, to repair the broken family relationship. Soon the father and son come to a quiet beach. This is where Cage played when he was a child, full of countless beautiful childhood memories. He wants to jump into the sea to relax, but he restrains himself and runs to the side to make a call. He tells the real estate agent that he wants to give his son a surprise by taking him to see the house he bought, but the other party actually says that the house doesn't belong to Cage yet, because someone offered a higher price and paid in one-time cash. Cage is instantly anxious when he hears that, and says he's willing to add 100,000 yuan, but he needs a week to raise the money. But the real estate agent says harshly that only 48 hours will be given to him, otherwise he will directly say goodbye to the house. Although depressed by this matter, Cage still changes into his equipment and takes his son surfing.
Fuck off.
Having not come back for many years, Cage doesn't know why the local customs have become so tough. The most excessive thing is that, when seeing Cage and his son approaching the sea, several children suddenly roar, "Locals come first." Although Cage doesn't understand why the other party is so overbearing, he still patiently explains that he grew up here, but the other party doesn't listen at all, and repeats like a tape recorder, "Outsiders aren't allowed to approach here." At this time, a man in red rushes over. After learning the general situation, he calls Cage aside alone and says that people here aren't to be messed with. If Jack forcefully goes to surf, even if Cage steps forward to stop him, they will mercilessly knock out Jack's front teeth. Then he persuades, adults should learn to make choices. Leaving now is just losing face in front of your son, but if you insist on causing trouble, it will only make the result worse in the end. Besides, Australia isn't the only beach, he says and snatches the surfboard. Cage hesitates for a while, and then takes his son back to the car. In order to save a little dignity, Cage says that he has bought the house where he lived as a child. From there, you can see the most beautiful scenery of this coastal city. Jack is still depressed about what happened just now, and tells his father, "I just want to go home now." After hearing that, Cage has to send the child to take a plane first, but he doesn't plan to leave and thinks that those surfing boys who blocked them will go home sooner or later. Just then, Cage receives another call from the real estate agent, and the other party says that another buyer has increased the price again. Cage is instantly angry when he hears that, and says that this house is of great use to him, and he must get it at any cost. After that, he asks friends for help to raise money, and what Cage has to do now is to win back his son's heart first. But those boys on the beach actually chase to the parking lot to drive Cage away, and make an international friendly gesture to him. Cage still chooses to put up with this until the sun is about to set. Those people still haven't left. At this point, his wife Helen calls Cage and asks where he has taken their son. Cage answers truthfully, adding that his father's house is finally up for sale. He swears he will buy the house back. Listening to the familiar voice and looking at the familiar place, Cage seems to see the scene of his proposal to win back the one he loves. There were tears welling up in his eyes. Finally, the sun sets completely. Those annoying boys still haven't gone home, even inviting a group of pretty girls to party. Just then, an old man steps forward and asks if they have seen his beloved dog, but they don't be bothered to respond. Cage watches all those scenes, perhaps inwardly lamenting how much his hometown has changed. At this point, hungry as he is, he sees a young man holding a pizza. The other asks if he's a surfing boy. Upon getting a negative answer, he says a pizza costs $100. The exorbitant price depresses Cage, but he's too hungry to refuse, so he has to take out the money. Just then, the boy suddenly needs to use the restroom, so Cage waits outside the bathroom. Suddenly hearing an unusual noise outside, he senses something's wrong and rushes back to the parking lot, only to find the pizza placed on the car roof has fallen to the ground, and the pizza is so far from the car, obviously a case of malicious destruction. No need to guess, it's clearly the surfing boys. He storms over to confront them, but they send a tough guy to fight Cage. Cage is tough at first, but when he sees the broken wine bottle that could pierce an artery, he flinches. Cage is woken from his sleep and sees a policeman standing in front of the car. Cage hurriedly says the surfing boys here have robbed him. They also gathered and ate a lot of drugs last night. Then he prepares to take the police to arrest them. Never wondering why the police came at dawn, seeing the police still standing there, Cage reminds him to arrest the boys quickly, but the police tell him to stay put, saying they'll handle it themselves. But Cage is curious about what they'll do, so he trades his sunglasses with an old man for a telescope. He's instantly shocked by what he sees. Unexpectedly, the police kneel to Scott, before he can figure it out. The old man leans in to explain that Scott's grandfather stole most of the nearby land, becoming a cunning local tyrant, and no one dares to disobey him. Then he says a lot more. Cage senses there's a story and asks what happened. The old man says his son Charlie was a famous surfer, winning several surfing competitions. The shark's tooth necklace around his neck is proof. But Scott and his men took Charlie away, and the old man never saw his son again. Moreover, Scott killed his beloved dog. Since the old man knows the dog is dead, why does he post missing dog posters everywhere? The old man explains he just wants to annoy Scott, or maybe find an excuse to keep busy. Maybe one day he'll go crazy enough to blow Scott to pieces. These words strike a chord, and Cage decides to be tough, going to the beach to warn them to return his surfboard. Scott looks back at the trophy, and says it's been here for years. The complicit police echo him, saying the board hung on the door when he was in diapers. Though Cage is furious, the other side has the numbers, so he has to leave the beach. Now hungry and tired, Cage wants to fill his water cup, but sees a bag of fresh poop on the water fountain. Cage has no choice but to go to the restroom, but he can't get over the mental hurdle. How can he stoop to drinking toilet water? Cage, coming back to his senses, runs to urinate, and stands on the toilet to peek right away. When he hears someone approaching, he finds the old man hiding something high up, murmuring leave this to his son in charge. Before leaving, Cage is about to go out, when he meets with the surfing boys doodling freely on his car. He wants to rush forward to stop them, but steps on glass shards barefoot. Worst of all, the car has no power left, because Cage ran the air conditioner all night. He has to ask a passing lady for help. Luckily, she is kind, and the car charging problem is solved now. Next, he needs to figure out how to fill his stomach. Just then, the breakfast cart starts operating. Cage goes to order breakfast, but when ready to pay, finds his phone dead. His wallet is also mysteriously lost, so Cage asks the boss for help charging the phone, but the other party says, you have to pay to charge, but he can't pay without charging the phone. Cage feels exhausted and asks how to get the boss to charge the phone and allow credit. The crafty boss sets his sights on Cage's watch. Although the watch was given by his late father, Cage is in a difficult situation. He plans to redeem it after charging the phone, and ask for the ordered breakfast, but the boss suddenly goes back on his word, only willing to give him a cup of coffee. Cage takes the coffee to enjoy. When a man yells, only surfing boys deserve coffee, others don't. This is really too much. After a while, a French couple prepares to surf, and Cage kindly warns them, but the couple obviously doesn't realize the seriousness, and naturally gets beaten up. Just then, Cage suddenly thinks of the house. He wants to get the phone from the breakfast cart, but it's closed. He has to rummage through the car in a panic, and finally finds a coin. Then he rushes to a public phone booth to call a friend, saying, if the real estate agent has news, tell them to call this number. After hanging up, Cage sees the couple leave dejectedly, causing a pang of sorrow in his heart. Cage finally decides to resist. As soon as it's dark, he grabs a weapon and runs to the beach, but for some reason, pig squeals come from the surf boys' camp. Peeking through a gap, he sees them holding a welcome ceremony for new members. Scott is stamping new members with a red-hot iron, making Cage involuntarily nervous, but now is the perfect time to take the surfboard. The commotion alarms the surf boys, and Cage flees in panic. He dashes back to the parking lot, but they refuse to let him go, chasing after him with torches. Cage, panic-stricken, hides in the bushes. Even when a big snake comes nearby, he doesn't dare breathe. After all, those people outside are scarier than cold-blooded animals. If caught, he might be skinned alive. Cage wakes from sleep, looks for his car at dawn, and finds they've even stolen it. Just then, a police car arrives. Cage explains the situation, but the police threaten to send him to jail for vagrancy. Cage has to say he doesn't need help, but successive blows cause him to hallucinate. Looking at his childhood house, Cage even imagines himself inside with his family as harmonious as before. Just then, a familiar voice pulls him back to reality. It's the real estate agent showing the house to others. Cage asks him to know why, but the agent pretends not to recognize him. Cage thinks a phone call can prove it, so he rushes to the breakfast cart for his phone, but the boss denies everything. The boss even shows off the watch, saying, "It's a birthday gift from my father," making Cage want to beat him up, but he restrains himself and heads for the public phone booth to call a friend and prove he knows the agent. But the surf boys who saw everything occupy the booth first, knowing they do it on purpose. Cage steps forward to argue.
He's only 16!
Lay a fucking finger on him, that's child.
Cage has to trade his wedding ring. He finally approaches the phone booth, only to find the phone line has been cut. Watching Cage's embarrassed look, people around burst into deafening laughter. The experiences of recent days have caused Cage's mental problems. He confusedly gets into a junked car by the roadside, takes off the necklace on it and stuffs it into his pocket. Just then, the surfing boys hold a roast whole sheep party. Hungry Cage, who hasn't eaten or drunk for a long time, can only run to the trash can and rummage. He finds a bottle, goes to the toilet and fills it with turbid water. It's really hard to swallow, and the main thing is that the salt content is too high. After coming out of the toilet, he sees Scott holding a beer, who tells him to leave quickly after eating and drinking enough. Cage unwillingly says he grew up here, wants to surf and buy a house with memories for his wife and children. Scott laughs when he hears this, mocking that Cage's father once ended his own life in this sea. He also says that Cage claims to do it for his family, but now he doesn't even have a wedding ring on his hand, and he still has the nerve to say he has a family. Cage yells that his father's death was an accident.
Your father when he checked out.
Facing Scott's mental attack, Cage doesn't accept the suggestion or the food given by the other party, but retreats to the car by the roadside and stays until dark, drinking the water filled from the toilet. He is very grieved. He thought the worst was over, but unexpectedly a mouse suddenly rushed out and bit Cage. The next day, Cage, who was seriously dehydrated, comes to the toilet and vomits bitterly, but his brain hasn't completely shut down. Thinking that the old man had hidden something here, he takes down the red plastic bag right away, then runs to a place where there is no one, and opens it. Unexpectedly, there's a pistol inside. Cage experiments with the tree in front of him, and finds it can be used. He then finds Scott's dog, but when he thinks of death, the tragic scene of his father's death always appears in his mind. Cage finally can't do it. After crying for a while, he returns the gun. In order to live, he can only drink the dirty water in the puddles on the ground. He even picks up the mouse killed last night, and is about to eat it, but he meets the eyes of a passerby walking a dog. The other party thinks he's a pervert and runs away with the dog. Cage has to put the mouse into his pocket as reserve food. Luckily, when he is about to leave, he finds a nest of bird eggs, so he wolfs them down. Then he runs to ask passersby to borrow a mobile phone, but others don't want to pay attention to him. A crazy tramp. This way, Cage is crazy in the parking lot for a long time. Suddenly a familiar figure appears in the sight. Recognizing it's the woman who charged the car, he excitedly rushes forward to talk, and tells her that they once chatted. The woman has a bad memory, but luckily she recognizes Cage through the photos taken. She quickly hands him a bottle of water, and asks him how he became like this. Cage doesn't answer. After borrowing the phone and successfully talking to his friend, he is told that they can't get the house at all. Thinking that he can't save his broken family, Cage's eyes are instantly filled with tears. He angrily picks up the nearby guide sign, and runs all the way to one of the surfing boys. Then Cage angrily pushes the other person into the water. As the man is about to choke to death, Scott rushes over with others, saying Cage has proved himself and the team can accept him. But a new member welcome ceremony is necessary. They first give Cage some drugs, then let him sleep well. When Cage wakes up again, he finds clean clothes and his own watch beside him. After changing clothes and going out, Scott brands a unique mark on his hand, and then Cage degenerates and drinks with those who once bullied him. The next day, Cage asks Scott one thing, that is, where the old man's son has gone. The other party says Charlie fell for a girl, followed her to a drug addict's hotel, but was attacked and hit his head. The old man thinks Scott hired someone, aiming to punish the traitor who left, but Scott says he didn't do it, adding that an final test awaits Cage. Then everyone takes him to the scrapped car, and asks him to set it on fire. In fact, Cage knows this car belongs to the old man, and doesn't want to do it. Scott asks if he wants to live in his childhood house, and repair the broken family. This trick really works on Cage, so he has to light a match and throw it into the car.
Welcome.
Just then, Jack comes by bike, asking why his father hasn't answered the phone for days, and why he joined the evil gang. Before Cage can speak, Scott steps forward to apologize to Jack, saying they are good friends now, and inviting him to surf by the sea. With that, he takes Jack to the beach, while Cage stays to park his son's bike, but before opening the trunk, he sees the furious old man. The burned car had Charlie's last memento, so he rushes over with the red plastic bag. Cage knows there's a gun inside and hurries toward his son. The uninformed Scott still tries to block the old man, but the latter takes out the gun right away. Scott mocks that there might be no bullets inside. Then at the old man's request, everyone kneels on the beach facing the sea. To avenge his dog, he makes the dog killer bark like a dog for a long time, and releases him after feeling satisfied. Finally, only Cage and his son, and Scott are left. Cage knows there are 3 bullets in the gun, and yells to come at him as long as his son is released. But the other party spits on what Cage has done, saying this place is as dark as a prison now, and the nearby Seaview houses are actually cells. How can one be willing to sell their soul for such things? Cage says he has something of Charlie's, and has always wanted to find a chance to return it, then takes out the shark tooth necklace. He adds that Charlie must surf every day in the other world, and he and his son came here just to surf. With that, he calls his son and rushes toward the sea. Seeing the bad situation, Scott wants to grab the gun and counterattack. The old man believes his great vengeance is achieved. With years of obsession finally relieved, he walks toward the sea his son loved most, then ends his life with a gunshot. The film ends here. After watching the movie, I have to complain that the pace is really slow, especially the part where the male lead resists after being bullied. It's too tedious. Viewers all hope he can be tough quickly, feeling so anxious that they want to fast forward. Besides, the logic of some plots can't keep up. For example, the male lead is insulted and put up with violence for surfing on the beach, and it feels like he's almost driven out of his mind. But Nicolas Cage is indeed an experienced actor who fully shows the male lead's feelings of paranoia, anger, despair, and confusion. Take the beach confrontation scene as an example. His mouth twitches and his voice trembles, and you can feel his depression and collapse through the screen. Julian McMahon, who plays the villain, also vividly portrays the petty-mindedness and ruthlessness of the small town bully. The movie also has many hidden lines. On the surface, it's the routine of a cool drama, where the male lead fights back after being bullied, but if you think deeply, it actually contains many real-life topics. For example, the contradiction between outsiders and local forces is very real. The male lead and his son are just outsiders coming to live here, just because they aren't locals. The local residents dislike them everywhere and even are full of hostility. There are such prejudices in many places in reality. The portrayal of the patriarchal violence cycle is also quite realistic. The male lead is publicly humiliated in front of his son, and in order to save his face as a father, he can only brace himself to fight back. This isn't just revenge, it's straight up putting chains on guys. When dignity is trampled on the ground, there seems to be no other way but to fight back with violence. This dilemma of having to be tough is the epitome of society's deformed expectation that men must be strong, which drives people to a desperate situation. The role of the old man as a homeless seems inconspicuous, but in fact, it's like a hidden key that unscrews the door of the movie's deep metaphor. On the surface, he is a group of marginal transparent people, but in fact, his fate is like a mirror to that of the male lead. One is crushed by violence in the open, and the other is forgotten by the world in the dark. They're all outsiders rejected by the mainstream order in their bones, and how cruel their existence is like a handful of salt thrown at the audience in the movie. At least the male lead can fight back by revenge, but the old man doesn't even have the qualification to be targeted, and can only fend for himself in the shadow. This contrast just tears apart the cruelest side of reality. When the male lead is deeper and deeper in violence for dignity, the word dignity is even a luxury for the old man, who can only disgust others by posting missing dog notices. It turns out that the cruelest thing isn't being trampled on, but being completely ignored and having no value to be a target. These marginal people inadvertently become the mirror of the movie. The male lead thinks he is fighting the bully, but in fact, he is trapped in the violent logic woven by the small town. Being bullied too much, he is full of nothing but hatred and despair. He thinks that killing with cruel tricks can end the endless violence, but in the end, he himself becomes the perpetrator of the violence. In order to revenge, he even sells his soul, causing the spiritual pillar that the homeless barely supports to collapse completely. But But although the bully bullies outsiders such as the male lead wantonly, he isn't the real murderer who killed the old man's son. The bully does evil to maintain the twisted order of the small town, and has no direct motive to kill the old man's son, because the old man has been oppressed by the bully for a long time. After his son died, out of hatred and despair, he attributes his son's death to the bully. What the old man does later is more like venting grief, and looking for reasons to resist. If you like my channel, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to it.